The night was supposed to be calm, but at exactly 2:17 a.m., something went horribly wrong. Elena Ward Harrington, 7 months pregnant, lay motionless in her bed, her eyes heavy with fatigue. Her husband, Cole, was hours away, but she'd never been more alone. And just outside the door, a woman with a mop bucket. The hospital, known for its high-end clientele, was about to be shaken to its core, but no one could have anticipated what would happen next. As the door creaked open, Elena felt the cold rush of air. She couldn't see the maid's face clearly, but she could feel her eyes darting around the room. Something wasn't right. The maid, her uniform plain and unassuming, moved with purpose. Too much purpose. Elena watched, frozen in her bed, as the woman approached the IV line hooked into her arm. She looked at me. Almost apologetically, Elena would later say. Then she reached into her pocket. The IV line tugged suddenly. Elena gasped, instinctively reaching for the call button. But it was too late. The alarm went off just as the woman pulled away, silently backing out of the room. Security swarmed in. Nurses rushed past, but the damage had been done. Elena's blood pressure dropped rapidly, but this wasn't just a medical emergency. Something far darker was at play here. Who could have sent this woman? Why her? And most importantly, who else was involved? If you're new here, don't miss what happens next. We're about to dive deep into the web of deceit, power, and revenge that goes all the way to the top. And trust me, you won't believe the twist. Make sure you hit that subscribe button now, because you'll want to stay for every shocking detail. Also, drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from. It's always great to know which part of the world we're reaching. And if you're as shocked as I am by what just happened, hit the like button and share this with someone who needs to see it too. As the investigation began, Elena would learn something far more terrifying. It wasn't just a maid in the wrong place at the wrong time. This was a calculated attack, a pawn in a game far bigger than she could have imagined. But that would only be the beginning of the twists, lies, and betrayal she was about to face. And when Elena's father-in-law, Billionaire Grant Harrington, enters the picture, things are about to get much worse. And when the media gets their hands on the story, everything will explode. This is only the tip of the iceberg. Just wait until you hear about the dirty secrets behind the family's wealth, and what the maid's involvement really means. Stay with me, because the truth, it's darker than you think. The room felt colder now. Elena's breath came in shallow bursts, the beeping of the machines around her growing louder as her mind raced. She tried to push the confusion away, but the reality was settling in fast. Something had just gone horribly wrong, and the feeling of being utterly exposed washed over her. She wasn't just a patient in this sterile hospital anymore. She was a target. But why? Who would want to harm her? Someone so close to the heart of the Harrington family. The nurses rushed in, their footsteps quick and frantic, but Elena could hardly focus on them. Her gaze kept darting toward the corner of the room where the maid had been. Rosa Marquez. Her name echoed in Elena's mind, the only piece of the puzzle she had, but it didn't make sense. Why had Rosa been there, so late at night? And why had she gone straight for the IV? Elena's chest tightened. She could feel the weight of her own blood running cold. Something was wrong. Something deeper than just an attack. As the nurses worked quickly, Elena couldn't help but notice the sharpness in the air, the sudden sense that nothing in this hospital was quite as it seemed. The team of doctors who came rushing in didn't even look surprised. They were prepared. But prepared for what? Elena's thoughts raced, but the pounding in her head made it harder to think clearly. Her mind wandered back to the moment when she saw Rosa standing in the doorway, the woman's eyes meeting hers with a look that could almost be called regret? Rosa had seen something in Elena's eyes, something that made her hesitate, but Elena couldn't hold on to that thought for long. The beeping became frantic. The room spun. The last thing she remembered was the sound of her own breath, ragged and panicked, as her world blurred into darkness. When Elena woke again, it was to the sterile smell of antiseptic and the low hum of hospital equipment. Her vision blurred in the dim light as her eyes struggled to adjust. And then she heard it. The voice. Cold, steady, and unmistakably familiar. "We need answers, Elena. And we need them fast." It was Grant Harrington, her father-in-law, the patriarch of the Harrington Empire. He stood at the foot of her bed, his eyes calculating, unreadable. His voice, usually calm, always controlled, sounded different now, urgent. She could feel the power in the room shift, the air thickening with a tension she couldn't quite grasp. His gaze moved to the nurses, then to the monitors. Finally, his attention returned to her. There was no warmth, just a cold promise of something far bigger than the hospital bed she lay in. Whoever did this to you will pay. This family won't let it go. Elena's throat tightened, but she couldn't speak. Her head was spinning, her mind was cloudy. But she knew one thing. This wasn't just about an attack on her. It was something deeper, something tied to the empire her family-in-law had built on power and secrecy. As Grant turned to leave, a nurse entered the room with a clipboard. Her expression was unreadable, but her hands trembled just enough for Elena to notice. The nurse's gaze flickered to the door where Grant had just exited. A strange, subtle exchange passed between them before the nurse turned her attention back to Elena. "We're going to take good care of you," the nurse said quietly, almost as if she were saying it to herself, her voice shaky. Elena's eyes locked onto her, the lingering feeling of dread returning. She knew nothing in this hospital was going to be simple. Not anymore. And that's when Elena realized something. Something that chilled her to the bone. The woman who attacked her? She wasn't just a maid. She wasn't just a random assailant. Rosa was part of something much, much bigger. Stay with me. Because what happens next? It changes everything you think you know about the Harrington family. Trust me. You won't want to miss this. By morning, the world had changed. The moment Elena's attack became public, the city erupted in chaos. News outlets rushed to cover the story. The gleaming marble steps of St. Albans Medical Center, usually a symbol of wealth and privilege, now hosted a spectacle of flashing cameras, reporters clamoring for details, and bystanders whispering in disbelief. The headline was everywhere. Pregnant wife attacked in her hospital room, Maid in custody, billionaire's family at the center of scandal. At the heart of it all stood Grant Harrington, the patriarch of the Harrington Empire, standing tall before the press. His suit was impeccable, his expression cold, calculated. A billionaire, a businessman, a man used to power and control. And now, he was fighting for his family's reputation. "My daughter-in-law has been the victim of a cowardly attack," Grant said, his voice steady. "I won't rest until the person responsible is brought to justice. I will do whatever it takes to ensure her safety and hold them accountable." His words rang out over the crowd, reassuring the public, silencing the questions. But Elena, still lying in the sterile confines of her hospital room, couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Was Rosa just a pawn? Or was there more to this attack? The cameras flashed as Grant's steely eyes locked onto a reporter. "I'm not at liberty to discuss any personal details of the investigation at this time," he said, his tone final, dismissive. The press erupted in a frenzy of questions, but Grant didn't flinch. He was used to this, used to the pressure, used to the power. And in that moment, Elena realized something. The Harrington family's empire was built on silence, on secrets. And those secrets? They weren't about to stay hidden for long. But as the cameras rolled, one thing became clear. This wasn't just about a woman attacked in a hospital room. This was about a family's legacy. The stakes were much higher now. Too much was at risk. Outside, the world was watching. Inside the hospital, Elena's world was unraveling in ways she couldn't yet understand. There was too much at play, too many players involved. And as much as Grant wanted to control the narrative, he didn't know everything. Not yet. And there were whispers. Whispers that would soon reach Elena's ears, starting with the unlikeliest of sources. The one person who might hold the key to what happened that night. But she had no idea yet how much her own family's secrets were about to catch up with her. For now, Elena's hospital room felt like a prison, and with each passing hour, the walls were closing in. Somewhere in the city, Rosa sat in a holding cell, her mind racing, her thoughts scattered. She had no idea why she'd been chosen for this, why she'd been forced into this twisted game. But as the minutes ticked by, she realized one thing. Someone had set her up. She wasn't the mastermind. She was just the tool. The question remained. Who had sent her to do this? The media may have chosen their villain, but there were bigger forces at work, forces much harder to pinpoint. And as Elena's eyes drifted toward the window, staring at the first light of day spilling across the city, she felt the weight of something more than fear. She was now a part of a game with no rules, no mercy. Detective Marcus Hale was no stranger to high-profile cases. In fact, he had seen his fair share of wealth and power. And he had come to understand something most others didn't. Money didn't always buy answers. Sometimes, it just bought silence. The moment he stepped into the sterile hospital room, Elena knew he wasn't like the others. His eyes weren't searching for sympathy or reassurance. He was here for something else, something deeper. Elena's pulse quickened as he approached her bedside. She wasn't sure whether to feel relief or more apprehension, but there was no time to sort it out. Hale was here, and he wasn't going to back down until he had the truth. "Ms. Ward Harrington," Hale began, his voice steady, almost too calm. "I know this is difficult, but I need you to tell me everything you remember about last night. Every detail matters." Elena hesitated, her thoughts scattered in the wake of the attack. Her mind kept returning to that moment, the maid, Rosa Marquez, standing there in the doorway, almost apologetically, before moving toward the IV. The memory sent a chill down her spine. "I don't know why she came in," Elena said, her voice shaky. "She seemed almost hesitant, but then she moved straight for my IV line, and she cut it. I don't know what she was trying to do." Hale leaned forward, his gaze piercing. "What about the hallway? Did you see anyone else?" Elena shook her head. "No, no one. Just her. But—" Her thoughts faltered. She had seen something. She was sure of it. Just before the attack. A brief moment, a flash of recognition in Rosa's eyes. Elena wasn't sure if it was fear or guilt, but something told her it wasn't as simple as an attack. Rosa had been nervous. Detective Hale watched her closely, taking in every word, every pause. "Was there anyone you trust that was in the hospital with you that night? Someone who might have helped her?" Elena's heart sank. She wanted to believe that someone would have helped, that someone had stopped Rosa from doing worse. But there was something else, something she couldn't quite place. A name, a figure, a memory she couldn't fully recall yet. "No, I don't think so," Elena replied, the uncertainty in her voice heavy. Hale nodded, but didn't look convinced. His eyes briefly flicked to the corner of the room, where a security monitor displayed images of the hospital hallways. The footage showed Rosa walking calmly, her eyes scanning, before she approached Elena's room. But something caught Hale's attention. It wasn't just Rosa on the screen. There, in the corner, was another figure, someone who had passed by the hallway just minutes before the attack. Someone Elena recognized, though she couldn't place where she'd seen him before. Hale's finger moved slowly to the screen, pausing at the figure's face. "Do you recognize him?" Elena's eyes widened. The man in the footage had a cold, calculating look, standing almost too still in the background. His presence seemed too deliberate, as if he was waiting for something, or someone. Elena's breath caught. "That's Cole, my husband." She could hardly believe it. The very man she trusted, the father of her child, standing just outside her door, watching it all unfold. But why hadn't she seen him? But Hale didn't give her time to react. He was already moving toward the door. "We'll need to speak to him next." Elena sat frozen. A dozen thoughts crashed through her mind. What did this mean? What was Cole doing in that hallway? Why hadn't he told her? And what had he known? But before Elena could ask any of these questions, Hale's words echoed in her mind, lingering in the air like a cold draft. If Cole was involved, then everything we thought we knew changes. As Hale exited the room, Elena's head spun with questions. Was Cole part of this? Had he been trying to protect her? Or was he the one who had put her in harm's way? One thing was certain. This investigation was just beginning, and Elena was about to uncover a truth that would shatter everything she thought she knew about her family, her marriage, and herself. The hours after Hale's visit passed slowly. The beeping of the machines, the occasional shuffle of nurses, and the distant murmur of voices outside her room filled Elena's ears, but her mind remained fixed on one thing: the man in the hallway. Cole. She couldn't get the image of his face out of her head. The way he stood there, his eyes cold, as if he knew exactly what was about to happen. And the question gnawed at her. Why hadn't he told her? The truth, or whatever semblance of it, felt just beyond her reach. She could feel it closing in, but it wasn't clear enough to grasp. The door creaked open. Elena didn't look up immediately, her thoughts still on Cole. But when she heard the familiar voice, she knew who it was. "Talia," Elena whispered, her voice hoarse from the hours of silence. Talia Brooks, Elena's best friend from college, stepped into the room. Her brown eyes were full of concern, her expression unreadable. Talia had always been the one Elena could count on, the one person who saw beyond the surface. But today, there was something different in her eyes. Talia's gaze flicked to the door, then back to Elena. She lowered her voice, almost as if she were afraid someone might be listening. "I need to tell you something," Talia began, her voice shaky. "Something I didn't want to say before, because I thought it was nothing." Elena's pulse quickened. "What is it?" she asked, sitting up a little straighter in the bed. Something in Talia's tone told her this wasn't just a passing comment. This was important. Talia hesitated. 2 weeks ago, I was at the charity gala at the Pierre. You know, the one your family hosted for neonatal research. She paused, glancing around the room as if to make sure they were alone. "I saw something. I saw Cole arguing with a woman outside a service entrance. She was wearing a hotel jacket. I didn't think much of it at the time. But now, with everything happening, I can't shake it." Elena's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" she asked, a chill spreading through her. She knew exactly where this conversation was going. She knew that this was more than a coincidence. Talia bit her lip, staring at the floor. "I don't know why, but I have a bad feeling about it. She was familiar, but I couldn't place her face. And Cole, he was angry. Really angry. He was speaking to her like he didn't want anyone to hear, like he was telling her something important." Elena felt her stomach twist. The pieces weren't adding up. Cole had been with Rosa, but how much did he know? Was he a part of it? Or was he being manipulated, like Elena had been? "Talia, why didn't you tell me this before?" Elena's voice cracked. "This could be important. If Cole's been involved with this woman, why didn't you say something earlier?" Talia shifted uncomfortably. "I didn't think it was anything more than a misunderstanding. You know how he gets sometimes. He's protective, especially with your family's business. But now, I don't know. I think I should have said something sooner." Elena sank back into her pillow, the weight of Talia's words pressing on her chest. Every instinct told her that there was more to this than she was being told. Talia's warning felt like a sign, a warning shot that her marriage, her trust in Cole, was on the verge of shattering. "What do we do now?" Elena asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Talia's eyes met hers, a flicker of fear in them. "We need to get the full story. We can't let this slide." The silence stretched between them as Elena processed the weight of Talia's words. She was beginning to see the cracks in her marriage, the ones she had ignored for too long. Her trust in Cole, in everything she thought she knew about him, was slipping away with every passing moment. But there was more. Elena could feel it. Something else was hiding in the shadows, and Talia's warning was just the beginning. As Talia left, Elena's mind raced. She needed to speak to Cole. She needed answers, even if it meant confronting him with everything she'd learned. But there was one thing she couldn't ignore: the woman at the service entrance. The woman who spoke to Cole like they shared a secret. Who was she? And why had Cole never told Elena about her? The camera lingers on Elena's face as she stares out the window, the faint glow of the city skyline reflecting in her eyes. The sound of sirens in the distance feels like the beginning of something bigger, something that will change everything she thought she knew about her life. The days following the attack blurred together. Each morning brought fresh headlines, The same scandalous images of Elena's hospital room, of Rosa's arrest, of Cole's stoic silence. The world outside the hospital seemed to revolve around one thing: the Harrington family scandal. But inside the sterile walls, a different story was unfolding. Elena could feel the walls closing in. Her thoughts were no longer her own. Her every move was scrutinized, every word weighed. She could barely look at Cole without her mind running through 100 different questions. But the silence between them was suffocating. One afternoon, Cole finally arrived at the hospital. He stepped into the room with his usual polished demeanor, tall, dark, and unyielding. But today, there was something different in his eyes, something Elena couldn't quite read. He closed the door behind him and stood at the foot of her bed, the distance between them heavier than ever. "How are you feeling?" Cole asked, his voice betraying nothing, his eyes avoiding hers. The question, though caring in tone, sounded hollow to Elena. There was no warmth in it, no sense of real concern. She wondered if he had ever asked that question out of genuine care, or if it had just become another line to say in public. She wanted to scream, to demand answers, but the words caught in her throat. The air in the room grew heavier with each passing second. The silence between them seemed to speak louder than any words could. "I'm fine," Elena replied softly, her voice strained. "But I need to know, Cole. I need to understand why you were outside my room that night, why you didn't tell me, why you've been hiding things." Cole's expression hardened at her words. His jaw clenched, his fists tightened at his sides. He took a slow, deliberate step forward, but still didn't meet her gaze. "You don't know everything, Elena," he said, his voice cold now. "There are things I'm protecting you from, things you don't need to know. Not yet." Elena stared at him, stunned. Protecting her from what? The truth? Or something worse? His words felt like a wall being built between them, one she couldn't tear down no matter how hard she tried. "Protecting me?" Elena repeated, the words bitter in her mouth. "From what? The woman who attacked me? Or the man you were talking to outside my room?" Her voice cracked with the intensity of the question. The anger, the confusion, the betrayal, all of it bubbled to the surface in that moment. But Cole wasn't ready to face it. His eyes finally met hers, but they weren't filled with the love she once knew. Instead, they were guarded, distant. "You don't understand," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "This isn't about you. It's about the family, about the business. You don't get to ask these questions right now." The words hit Elena like a slap in the face. The family? The business? Was that what all of this was really about? Was her life, her safety, just a pawn in a game of power and control? Elena felt a cold pit form in her stomach. She was no longer just questioning Cole's actions. She was questioning the very foundation of the life she had built with him. "You've been lying to me," she said, her voice trembling with anger and hurt. "This whole time you've been hiding things from me, and I don't even know who you are anymore." Cole's face remained unreadable, but something in his eyes flickered. Was it guilt? Regret? Or was it something darker? He took a deep breath, and for the first time, he seemed to falter. "I'm trying to protect you, Elena. From all of this. From the truth." "The truth?" Elena whispered, her voice barely audible. "What truth?" Cole stepped back, his posture rigid. He didn't answer right away, his eyes darting around the room, as if looking for a way out of this conversation. He opened his mouth, but the words didn't come. Instead, he stood there, a silent figure, the weight of his unspoken secrets hanging heavy in the air. Finally, Cole spoke, his voice strained with tension. "You'll understand soon enough," he said. "Just trust me, Elena. Please. I'm doing this for us. For our family." But Elena couldn't trust him anymore. She couldn't even trust herself to understand what was really happening. All she knew was that the man standing before her wasn't the same man she had married. And whatever truth he was hiding, it was bigger than anything she could imagine. As Cole turned to leave the room, Elena felt her world start to crumble around her. The walls that had kept her safe, that had kept her family together, were starting to crack. And with each passing second, she realized one terrifying truth. There was no going back from here. Not anymore. Stay with me. Because what comes next? It will change everything you thought you knew about this family. And about Cole. The camera lingers on Elena's face as she watches Cole walk away, her heart heavy with doubt and fear. The sound of the door closing echoes, leaving her alone in the silence. The next morning, Elena's mind was still spinning. Her conversation with Cole had left her shaken, but it was the lingering question that kept her awake. Why had Cole been standing in that hallway? What was he hiding? But today, something else demanded her attention. Detective Marcus Hale was back at St. Albans. This time, he wasn't just here for Elena. He was here to dig deeper into the woman who had attacked her, Rosa Marquez. Rosa was being held in a nearby interrogation room, her lawyer present. Hale had already reviewed the footage, interviewed witnesses, and pieced together what little he had. But there were still more questions than answers. Elena, though still confined to her bed, had requested to be briefed. Hale was determined to understand who Rosa really was and what role she had played in the attack. "You wanted to speak with her?" Hale's voice was calm, but there was a hint of urgency in it. He had already seen Rosa's file. No priors, no criminal record. A single mother with a second job at a hotel in Midtown. Elena nodded, her eyes clouded with doubt. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Rosa than just a maid on a mission. Rosa sat in the interrogation room, her hands folded in her lap. She didn't look like the woman who had attacked Elena in that hospital room. She was quiet, broken in a way, but there was no fear in her eyes anymore. She had already decided she wasn't going to run from this. When Hale walked in, he didn't say anything at first. He simply sat across from her, his eyes sharp, waiting for her to speak. Rosa didn't meet his gaze, but she was the one to break the silence. "I didn't mean to hurt her," Rosa said quietly, her voice shaking. "I was trying to stop something bigger than me. They told me I had to do it." Hale leaned in slightly. "Who told you? Who gave you those instructions?" Rosa hesitated, glancing nervously at the door. Her lawyer's voice cut through the air, advising her to stay silent, but Rosa didn't listen. She was past caring about legal counsel. She had to speak the truth, if she was going to survive this. "He wasn't with the family," Rosa began, her voice barely above a whisper. "He worked for them, for Mr. Harrington." Hale's pen scratched against his notepad. "What do you mean? Who is he?" Rosa closed her eyes, as if trying to block out the memory. "I don't know his name, but I saw him on TV. He's one of Mr. Harrington's men, a fixer. He said there was a threat in the hospital. A nurse was paid to switch the IV, and that's when he told me what I had to do." Hale's grip tightened on his notepad. This was the lead he had been waiting for. The first real clue that something was happening inside the Harrington family's orbit. Something far darker than a simple attack. But who was this man? And why had he been in the background, manipulating events from the shadows? Hale's mind raced. He needed to know more, needed to uncover the truth buried deep within the Harrington empire. But Rosa wasn't done yet. "He told me to cut the IV line, to buy time for someone else to get the right bag in. He said I was just a distraction, nothing more. But I saw someone else. I saw a nurse. She passed by, and she looked terrified. She heard him tell me the room number, and she heard what he said. I don't think she was supposed to hear it." The puzzle pieces were starting to fall into place. This wasn't just a maid following orders. This was part of a bigger scheme, a web of lies and manipulation. As Hale left the interrogation room, he couldn't shake the feeling that the truth was just out of reach. He had one name, one lead, a man in the background, pulling strings. But the question remained, was he working alone? Back in Elena's room, she sat motionless, her mind racing. The attack, the strange silence, the family secrets. They were all connected. But the full picture was still hidden in the shadows. Elena could feel it now. Someone was lying. Someone had orchestrated this attack. But why? And who? The pieces were moving into place, but the more Elena learned, the less she understood. Each answer led to more questions, and the truth was slipping further out of her reach. But she knew one thing for sure. The Harrington family was about to unravel. The days following Detective Hale's interview with Rosa felt like they were passing in slow motion. Elena had been hoping for answers, but each new piece of information only seemed to deepen the mystery. Rosa's cryptic words lingered in her mind, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she was only seeing half the picture. Hale was determined to make progress. He spent hours in the hospital's medical records room, going over Elena's charts, speaking to nurses, and reviewing security footage. His instincts told him there was more going on here than a simple attack, but there were still gaps in the story, gaps that needed filling. One morning, Hale called Elena into his office. She arrived with a sense of trepidation, unsure of what new developments might surface. As she sat down across from him, she could see the seriousness in his eyes. "We've got the results from the lab," Hale said, his voice steady but tinged with something else, something Elena couldn't place. He slid a piece of paper across the desk to her. Elena took the paper, her hands trembling slightly as she scanned the words. At first they didn't make sense. The text was technical, medical jargon she couldn't fully comprehend. But one word stood out: sedative. Her heart skipped a beat. The IV bag used that night had been tampered with. It contained a sedative, a powerful one, not prescribed for her by the attending physician. "But why?" Elena whispered, the question hanging in the air between them. "Why would anyone do this?" "That's the question, isn't it?" Hale replied, leaning back in his chair. "This wasn't just an attack. Someone wanted you sedated. Someone needed you unconscious for a reason." Elena felt the weight of the words pressing down on her chest. Whoever had orchestrated this had not only wanted to harm her, but they had wanted her helpless. Why? What had they been planning? "It's not just the IV bag that's problematic," Hale continued, his voice lowering as if sharing something crucial. "We found traces of a different kind of solution in your bloodstream, something we can't yet identify. That's going to take a few more days to analyze." This revelation hit Elena harder than the initial attack. The truth was becoming clearer. Someone had not only planned to silence her, but they had also ensured she couldn't fight back. But why? And who? The pieces were fitting together, but something didn't sit right. Something was missing. Another layer of the plan, something that was just out of reach. "Did you recognize the name of the nurse who swapped your IV bag?" Hale asked, his eyes narrowing, his suspicion growing. Elena paused, her mind racing. The nurse. The one who had come in just before Rosa. She remembered her. Her face, her nervous expression. The way she kept glancing around the room as though she was looking for someone. Elena hadn't thought much of it at the time, but now... "Her name," Elena muttered, almost to herself. "Kara Whitfield." "Exactly," Hale said. "We're going to need to speak to her next. Something tells me she knows more than she's letting on." Elena felt a chill crawl up her spine. Kara. She had been in the room that night, but Elena had been too focused on the chaos to really see her. Now she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about the nurse. Was she complicit in this? Or was she another pawn in a much bigger game? As Hale stood to leave, Elena's mind raced. The mystery of the IV bag was just one piece of the puzzle. There were bigger forces at play here, and they were circling closer to her than she had ever imagined. "We'll find her," Hale said, his voice resolute. "We'll find the answers. But for now, you need to rest. We'll handle the rest." But Elena knew. The rest of the story wasn't going to wait for her to rest. The deeper she dug into this, the more dangerous it became. And the more questions she asked, the more she realized that her family's legacy was built on lies. Lies that were about to come crashing down on all of them. And as Hale left, Elena sat in silence, the weight of the truth pressing down on her. The mystery of the IV was only the beginning. Whoever was behind this had been playing a much bigger game, one that she wasn't prepared for. The walls were closing in, and Elena didn't know who to trust anymore. She needed answers, and fast. before the truth swallowed her whole. In the days following Hale's revelation about the tampered IV, the walls of Elena's hospital room seemed to close in tighter. The world outside was a blur of flashing cameras and media frenzy, but inside, there was only silence and the gnawing feeling of dread. The truth was slipping further away with each passing hour, and Elena knew one thing for certain. Her family was hiding something. But what? Her thoughts were interrupted when Detective Hale called again. This time, his voice was quieter, almost hushed, as if he were speaking to her from the shadows. Elena, there's someone you need to meet. Someone who can give us more answers. His name is Dane Rourke. The name hit Elena like a cold wave. She had heard it before. Whispers at family gatherings, hushed conversations behind closed doors. Dane Rourke wasn't just another fixer. He was the fixer for the Harrington family. A shadow who moved behind the scenes, handling problems with a cold efficiency that made even the most hardened businessmen nervous. Why him? Elena asked, her voice barely a whisper. She already knew the answer. But hearing it out loud sent a chill down her spine. Hale didn't hesitate. Rourke's been handling things for the Harringtons for years. He's a problem solver, but his methods aren't exactly by the book. I have reason to believe he's connected to this, somehow. If we can get to him, we might be able to learn who's really pulling the strings. The idea of meeting Dane Rourke felt like stepping into the lion's den. He was a man who thrived in the shadows, pulling strings and controlling the narrative without anyone ever knowing he was there. And if he was involved in Elena's attack, it meant the Harrington family's secrets were darker than she could have ever imagined. But Elena was tired of waiting, tired of being kept in the dark. She wanted answers, and if meeting Rourke was the key to uncovering the truth, she would face him head-on. Later that day, Hale arranged the meeting. Elena sat in a small, dimly lit room in the hospital, her heart pounding as she waited. The door opened quietly, and a tall, broad-shouldered man stepped inside. His presence was commanding, but his face was calm, almost calculating. This was Dane Rourke. He was dressed in a crisp black suit, his tie perfectly knotted, but his eyes were cold, shrewd, as if he could see straight through her. He didn't introduce himself, didn't offer a handshake. Instead, he took a seat across from her, studying her quietly, as if evaluating her worth in his eyes. Elena's breath hitched. She could feel the weight of his gaze, the unease it brought. She had heard rumors about him, how he could make problems disappear without a trace, how his hands were always clean, but his methods were ruthless. I know you're looking for answers, Rourke said, his voice smooth, almost too calm. But answers come at a price. Are you willing to pay it? Elena didn't hesitate. She had no choice now. If she wanted to get to the bottom of this, if she wanted to understand who was behind the attack, she had to play along. What's the price? She asked, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her insides. Rourke leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. Information isn't free, Elena. You want to know who's behind this, who's been pulling strings? I can give you that. But you have to understand, once you step into this world, there's no turning back. Things will change. Forever. Elena's mind raced. Could she really trust him? Could she trust anyone in her family anymore? The world she thought she knew was crumbling before her eyes. And the deeper she dug, the more she realized she was standing on the edge of something dangerous, something far bigger than her family's wealth and reputation. But there was no turning back now. She had already crossed the line. What do you know? Elena asked, her voice firm despite the uncertainty. Tell me what you know, Dane. Rourke smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile someone gives when they know they hold all the cards. I know everything, Elena, and I can help you, if you're willing to trust me. But Elena wasn't sure she could trust anyone anymore. The pieces were starting to fall into place, but the truth was more elusive than ever. And with every answer, more questions were raised. What was the cost of finding out the truth? Rourke stood up, ready to leave. I'll be in touch. You'll get your answer soon enough. But remember this, some doors, once opened, can't be closed. Elena watched him leave, the door clicking softly behind him. The weight of his words hung heavy in the air, and the feeling that she was in deeper than she had ever realized gnawed at her. Whatever game was being played, Elena was now fully a part of it. and there was no turning back. The days after Elena's meeting with Dane Rourke felt like they moved in a blur. Each passing moment dragged her further into the web of secrets that had surrounded her family for years. The walls of her hospital room no longer felt like a sanctuary. They felt like a prison. And inside that prison, she was growing more desperate for answers. But it wasn't just the mystery of the IV bag or Cole's cryptic behavior that kept her awake. It was the growing realization that someone inside the hospital was involved. Someone who had been in her room the night of the attack. Someone who had been far closer than Elena could have ever imagined. Detective Hale had made it clear. He was focused on Kara Whitfield, the nurse who had come in just before Rosa, the one who had appeared so nervous. Her presence hadn't seemed important at the time, but now, with everything that had been uncovered, it felt like the final missing piece. If anyone knew the truth, it was her. Elena sat in her hospital room, staring at the door, knowing that this was the moment. Kara was coming. Hale had arranged the interview. The only question now was whether Kara would crack. The nurse walked into the room quietly, her steps measured, her face unreadable. Kara Whitfield was young, maybe 25, her brown hair pulled back in a tight ponytail. But there was a weariness in her eyes, something Elena hadn't noticed before. Something that spoke of guilt and fear, and an unspoken desperation. Kara closed the door behind her softly, then sat down across from Elena, her hands fidgeting with the hem of her scrubs. She didn't look like a criminal, but then again, neither did Rosa. The question that had been burning in Elena's mind since the first moment she saw Kara was the same one Hale had asked earlier. Was Kara involved in this? Or was she just another pawn in a game she didn't understand? "I need to know what happened that night," Elena said, her voice steady despite the pounding of her heart. She was done waiting, done wondering. She needed answers. Kara avoided her gaze, looking down at her hands. I don't know what you think you know, Elena," she said quietly, her voice shaking slightly. "But I didn't do anything wrong. I was just following orders." Elena leaned forward, her heart hammering in her chest. "Orders from who?" Kara's eyes darted around the room, as if looking for someone to step in. Her hands were shaking now, and Elena could see the panic rising in her chest. It wasn't just fear, it was guilt. Kara had been involved, but how much? And who had put her in this position? Kara swallowed hard, her voice barely above a whisper. "There was a man. He came to me a few days before the attack. He gave me a proposition." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. The pieces were starting to fall into place. A man? Who was he? And what was the connection to the Harringtons? Kara took a deep breath and continued. "He said he worked for the family. He said there was a threat in the hospital. He told me someone was going to change the IV bags, but it needed to look like an accident. He said I had to switch the bags so no one would know." "Who was he?" Elena asked, her voice sharp with demand. "What was his name?" Kara hesitated, then shook her head. "I never got his name. He just gave me a card. Said he worked for Mr. Harrington." The mention of Mr. Harrington sent a jolt through Elena's body. Her mind raced with the possibilities. Had her father-in-law been involved in this? Was this another of his shady deals? Or was it someone else from the family's inner circle? Someone whose name Elena didn't even know yet? "Did anyone else know about this?" Elena asked, her voice tight. "Did you tell anyone?" Kara's eyes dropped to her lap. "I tried to back out. I told him I didn't want to do it. But he said if I didn't, there would be consequences." "What consequences?" Elena's voice cracked as the full weight of the situation sank in. This wasn't just an isolated incident. This was part of something much bigger, something far more sinister than a maid attacking a pregnant woman. Kara looked up, her eyes filled with regret. "He said if I didn't do what he asked, they'd hurt my family, my mom, my little brother. He said I wouldn't have a choice." Elena felt her stomach twist. It wasn't just about her. It was about someone else using their power to control others, to force them into doing things they didn't want to do. Kara had been another pawn in a game that Elena still didn't fully understand. "You didn't have a choice?" Elena whispered, the anger welling up in her chest. And you just did what they told you? Kara's face flushed with shame. I had no choice. I couldn't let anything happen to my family. Elena stared at Kara, her mind racing. Who was the man who had threatened her? Was it one of her father-in-law's men? Or was there someone else pulling the strings in the shadows? The answers were within reach, but they were just out of her grasp. As Kara left the room, Elena sat still, the weight of the confession pressing heavily on her chest. The walls of lies were starting to crumble, but with every answer came even more questions. Someone was behind this. Someone with the power to make people disappear, to control them with fear. And Elena was getting closer to uncovering their identity. But as the door clicked shut behind Kara, one thing was certain. Elena's life, and everything she thought she knew, was about to change forever. The truth had been slipping through Elena's fingers for days. Every step she took toward understanding only seemed to uncover more lies, more secrets. But one thing had become clear. She was being dragged deeper into a world she never asked to be a part of, and it was a world where power and manipulation reigned supreme. But the revelation she was about to hear, well, that would change everything. It would make all the pieces click into place, and it would send shockwaves through her family's empire. It came in the form of an anonymous tip, the kind of tip you never saw coming. Evan Mercer was a junior accountant at one of the subsidiaries of the Harrington Empire. A quiet man, invisible in the sea of well-dressed executives and power players that surrounded the family. He wasn't part of the inner circle. He wasn't a player in the game, at least that's what he thought. But one day, he stumbled across something that made his blood run cold. A set of financial records that didn't add up. Payments labeled as clinical liaison services were being funneled to a fake clinic in New Jersey, one that existed only on paper. And the dates? They lined up with Elena's pregnancy. Evan sat at his desk late one night, the glow of his computer screen the only light in the office. He stared at the documents in front of him, his fingers trembling as he clicked through the files. The numbers didn't make sense, the clinic wasn't real. And the payments, they were all routed under Elena's name. He knew what he had to do. He couldn't ignore it. He couldn't pretend he didn't see the connections, the dots that were starting to line up. He needed to speak up. He had to. But who could he trust? The Harringtons were known for their ruthless way of dealing with problems. If he said the wrong thing, if he went to the wrong person, everything he knew would come crashing down. And maybe he'd be gone too. He opened a new email, typed the message quickly, then hesitated. He could send it to an anonymous tip service. Nothing would tie it back to him. But then, his cursor hovered over the name of a reporter he had followed on social media. A journalist who had a reputation for surviving lawsuits and exposing corporate corruption. A journalist who might actually make something of this. He clicked. And just like that, everything changed. When the email landed in Elena's inbox, it didn't come with a warning. It didn't have a "Don't open this" label on it. But when she saw the subject line, Harrington family, exposed, her heart skipped a beat. She opened it slowly, the words on the screen making her stomach twist with dread. The tip came from someone inside her own family's empire. Someone who had seen the discrepancies. Someone who had noticed the same payments that had been routed to a ghost clinic. A clinic tied to her pregnancy. The revelation hit Elena like a punch in the gut. It wasn't just an attack on her. It wasn't just about Rosa or Kara or Cole. This was about something bigger, something much darker. Whoever had orchestrated her attack, whoever had manipulated the events in the hospital, had been planning this for a long time. Her pregnancy was part of a bigger game. And now, Elena knew. The stakes were higher than she could have ever imagined. But who was behind it all? Evan's discovery led Elena to one inescapable conclusion. The family she thought she knew was built on a foundation of lies, deceit, and corruption. Someone had gone to extreme lengths to cover up their tracks, and Elena had been right in the middle of it all. She leaned back in her hospital bed, staring at the screen in disbelief. The world she thought she understood, the world she had married into, was built on betrayal. And now, there was no turning back. In the days to come, Elena would begin to piece together the full scope of what was happening. But for now, all she knew was this. Everything had changed. The power plays, the manipulation, the hidden payments. It was all connected. And the truth was closer than ever, waiting to be uncovered. But the question was, would she survive long enough to see it? The days after Elena received the email from the anonymous whistleblower were some of the longest of her life. Every passing moment brought more questions, but fewer answers. The walls that had once seemed so sturdy, her family, her marriage, the trust she had in her world, were cracking, and she was watching it all happen in slow motion. She couldn't escape the feeling that there was a larger game being played, one she hadn't even realized she was part of. And now, it wasn't just about the hospital attack. It was about her entire existence, the foundation of everything she knew, shattering beneath her feet. It was late at night when the lab results arrived. Elena had been staring blankly at her phone for hours, still reeling from Evan's discovery, when the notification flashed on her screen. The subject line simply read, "Paternity results." Elena's pulse quickened as she opened the message. It was from her doctor, but the words she read left her breathless. A string of medical jargon, numbers that meant nothing to her, but one phrase stood out like a glaring warning. Paternity probability, inconsistent with presumed father. The words hit her like a physical blow. She couldn't breathe. The screen blurred as her hands began to shake uncontrollably. It wasn't possible. The test, the one she had undergone in her first trimester, she'd been told everything was fine. But this was a different story. The results were pointing to a truth she didn't want to face. Inconsistent with presumed father. The words circled in her head like an endless echo. That meant what she feared, what she had avoided thinking about for weeks. The baby she was carrying might not be Cole's, but how? Why? Her mind raced, but she couldn't make sense of it. She had conceived in March, a night she could remember clearly. A quiet dinner, a stroll through Central Park, nothing out of the ordinary. There was no reason to believe the pregnancy wasn't Cole's, but the lab results said otherwise. And that meant everything she thought she knew about her family, her marriage, was about to be turned upside down. She needed answers, and she needed them now. Elena knew she couldn't wait for the results to be rechecked. She couldn't just let this linger in the shadows any longer. She had to confront Cole. There was no other option now. The time for silence was over. But first, she had to make one call that could change everything. Elena reached for the phone, dialing the number she'd had memorized for years, the one she never thought she'd need again. It was her father-in-law's number, the man who had always been the cornerstone of the Harrington empire. Grant Harrington. If there was anyone who could give her answers, it was him. Or so she hoped. The phone rang once, twice, and then, on the third ring, a familiar voice answered. His voice was smooth, confident, just like she remembered. "Elena," Grant said, his tone polite, but there was something cold behind it. "What can I do for you?" Elena took a deep breath. "I need to know something. It's about my pregnancy. I need to know if you know anything about a fertility clinic." There was a long pause. Too long. Just enough time for Elena to feel the weight of her words settle in the room. "A fertility clinic?" Grant's voice remained even, but Elena could hear the shift, just the slightest crack in his calm demeanor. "I don't know what you're talking about." Elena's stomach turned. She could feel the walls closing in, but she wasn't backing down now. "You're lying," she said softly, but with a firmness that surprised even her. "The clinic. Payments were made, and I want to know why it was tied to my pregnancy." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Elena could almost hear the calculations running through her father-in-law's mind, weighing his options. "I'm going to need you to listen carefully," Grant finally said, his voice lower now, guarded. "There are things about this family you don't understand. Things that have to stay in the past. For your sake, for everyone's sake, some doors must stay closed." "Some doors?" Elena's voice rose. "What do you mean? You've been hiding things from me. From me, my entire life, and you want me to just let it go? To stay in the dark while my entire world falls apart?" Grant's voice was sharp now. "I'm doing this to protect you, Elena. You have no idea what's really at stake here." The line went silent. Elena stared at the phone in her hand, her heart racing. She could hear the quiet click of the call ending on the other side, the finality of his words hanging in the air. Everything was about to change, and Elena knew she couldn't trust anyone, not even the family she had once believed was her shield. Whatever Grant was protecting, whatever truth he was hiding, Elena knew she was on the verge of uncovering something that would destroy everything she had once believed. Elena sat alone in her hospital room, the weight of the world pressing on her chest. The truth was right in front of her, but the pieces were still shifting, too many of them incomplete. She had confronted Cole. She had spoken to Rourke, to Kara, to Hale. Yet, with each conversation, the danger became clearer. There were forces at play far beyond her understanding, and they were closing in on her. But she was done waiting. She had been pushed to the edge, forced to question her marriage, her family, her life. Now, there was no turning back. She didn't wait for another call from Grant or Hale. She made up her mind. "I'm coming to see you," Elena said into her phone, her voice firm, unwavering. She wasn't asking anymore. This was the final step. Cole picked up immediately, his voice full of the same tension that had dominated their last conversation. "Elena, you don't need to do this. You don't know what you're getting yourself into." But Elena didn't care anymore. The veil of lies had been pulled back. The truths buried beneath the surface, the ones that had festered for years, were coming to light. "You've been hiding something from me," she said, her words like daggers. "And I'm not leaving until you tell me everything. I'm coming home. Now." She hung up the phone without waiting for his response. This was it. The moment she had been dreading and anticipating for so long. The door to the Grand Harrington estate opened with a quiet creak. The house was eerily silent. The same cold marble floors and pristine walls that had once given Elena a sense of safety now felt like a maze, a trap. She made her way through the hallway, the faint sound of her footsteps echoing through the empty halls. Her heart pounded in her chest as she approached the study, where Cole and Grant would be waiting. It was time to face the truth, no more running from it. Cole was the first to stand as she entered the room, his face hard, unreadable. Grant stood beside him, his posture stiff, like a statue. There was no warmth, no welcome, only the weight of the secrets between them. "I know about the clinic," Elena said, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. "I know about the payments, the lies. I know my pregnancy was never a simple blessing." Grant's eyes flicked to Cole, his jaw tight with irritation. But Elena wasn't looking at him anymore. She was looking straight at Cole, her husband, the man she thought she knew. "You knew," Elena whispered. "You knew everything. All of it." Cole's silence spoke louder than any words ever could. His eyes wavered, guilt flickering across his face before he quickly masked it. The truth hit Elena like a freight train, shattering whatever trust had remained between them. "I didn't want this," Cole said quietly, his voice low. "But I had no choice. There were things we needed to protect, things that couldn't be exposed." "What are you protecting?" Elena demanded, her voice rising with each word. "What could be more important than the truth, than me, than your child?" Grant stepped forward, his cold eyes locking onto Elena's. "This isn't about you, Elena. This is about the family, the legacy. We've built something that cannot be destroyed by a scandal, by a pregnancy that isn't what it seems." It was the first time Elena saw it clearly, the truth she had been too afraid to acknowledge. The family, the business, the empire. It was all more important than her life, than her child. The woman in the clinic, the money funneled through false channels. It had all been orchestrated to ensure the Harrington name stayed clean. Her pregnancy was a calculated move, an effort to cover up mistakes, to ensure the business could survive the fallout. And it wasn't just Cole and Grant. There was more, much more. The attack on her? It had been a distraction from something far darker, far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. They had used her pregnancy, as a pawn in a game of survival, and she had been blind to it all. Elena felt the weight of the truth settle over her. Her family had lied to her, betrayed her, and manipulated her every step of the way. They weren't protecting her. They were protecting themselves. "I can't be part of this anymore," Elena said, her voice breaking, but resolute. "You've made your choice, but I won't be part of your lies." And with that, Elena walked out. She left the Harrington estate behind, leaving her past and her family's empire in the dust. She didn't know what came next, but she knew one thing for sure. She would find her own path now. One without the shadow of lies, manipulation, and betrayal hanging over her head. The world was waiting for her to reclaim her life, her truth. And this time, she was in control. Elena had been through the fire. But now, she was ready to rise from the ashes.